Good afternoon. Welcome to this week's JPC webinar. I am Shoshana Bryan, Senior Director of the JPC and your host. Let me start out by saying war stinks. It's understandable that people want a peaceful solution or deconfliction or something. I do, and I suspect our guest, David Weinberg, does, but not everybody does. So we and Israel find ourselves in a war we didn't ask for, we didn't seek, but we have to win. This is the latest phase of Iran's 47-year war against the great Satan and the little Satan. And it's been going on long enough that we should understand where we are and where we're going. So there's a lot of coverage in the U.S. about the U.S. position on Iran and the activity that we're undertaking and the way our public sees the war. There's much less about Israel and what's going on in Israel. Our guest, David Weinberg, is going to help us fix that. Now, for anybody who's left here who thinks that the United States started a war with Iran, can I remind you, there were American hostages held for 444 days. The Marine barracks in Beirut, Khobar Towers, IEDs that killed more than 600 American troops and wounded thousands of others in Iraq. American military contractors killed in Jordan. Robert Dean Steedham, William Buckley, Rich Higgins, Robert Levinson, do not forget their names. And there's more, including illicit uranium enrichment and building ballistic missiles. That one applies to Israel as well. And Israel has three other reasons, and that's the three H's: Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. So I'm a skeptic about peace and deconfliction or ignoring the facts of the world. And I think our guest today will be as well. Before we go to David, I will go to the short form of the JPC introduction. The Jewish Policy Center was established in 1985 to provide perspectives and analysis of foreign and domestic policy by leading scholars, academics, and commentators. You can find all of our work on our website, jewishpolicycenter.org. That's jewishpolicycenter.org. We support strong military capability for the United States, strong U.S.-Israel security cooperation, and missile defense, all of which are proving their worth right now. Most important, we support the legitimacy and security of Israel against anyone who would deny them. And we support the efforts of the government of Israel and the IDF to defend the population in all of its borders and, where necessary, beyond those borders. Beyond the borders includes Lebanon, it includes Gaza, it includes Judea and Samaria, and it includes Iran. So today I bring you our guest, David Weinberg, a government relations and foreign affairs specialist living in Israel, having made Aliyah in 1990 from Canada. That's a long time, David. Do you still feel Canadian at all? Don't answer that. David is a senior fellow at Misgav, the Institute for National Security and Zionist Strategy at Habit Chonistim, Israel's Defense and Security Forum. He's a columnist for the Jerusalem Post and for Israel Hayom, and you've seen several of his articles on the JPC website, jewishpolicycenter.org. A prominent lecturer on public affairs and security, he has spoken in Israel, Canada, around the U.S., and around Europe at federations, advocacy forums, and universities. He's appeared in a variety of media venues and been quoted by a great many international publications. David knows a lot about a lot of things. The one that surprised me when we first met is that he is an accredited expert on Israeli and kosher wines, having studied enology at the London-based Wine and Spirit Education Trust, the world's leading institute for qualifying sommeliers. In his spare time, he conducts wine and food tours in Israel. I want one, David. So, David Weinberg, the floor is going to be yours. I'd ask you to start, excuse me, with a picture of Israel's home front. How are Israelis holding up? What are their expectations of your government? What's been the reaction of Israel's minority communities? I mean, you have Arabs and Druze and Christians and Baha'is. What's going on in Israel, David?
Thank you, Shoshana, and it's great to be with you and your listeners, even in the midst of war. As you can imagine, the Israeli home front struggles to balance work and family life and military service with the more than 46,000 incoming missile and attack drone alerts of the past 12 days. As residents of Israel continue to bear the brunt of region-wide war with 18 dead, 2,300 wounded, and 3,400 civilians made homeless as a result of Iranian strikes. Particularly bad are the cluster munitions that more than 50% of the incoming Iranian missiles have been filled with, which scatter death and destruction across multiple sites. One such missile splattered devastation across 16 sites earlier this week, and that's when two Israelis were killed. The cabinet is having difficulty deciding whether and when to partially reopen critical parts of the economy and civilian life, including air travel, large businesses, and schools. In the meantime, families are locked down at home with their kids, sometimes with elderly parents, for a second week, with multiple dashes all day and night into protected spaces every time there is an incoming missile alert, and there are jets roaring overhead constantly. I had three-year-old grandson with us for most of this past week, and he enjoys playing with a toy siren in the bomb shelter every time he's woken up in the middle of the night by an alert, until I confiscated that annoying toy at 2 a.m. last night. He and his parents were sheltering with us since the beginning of the war because they do not have a bomb shelter in or near their old apartment in Jerusalem, which unfortunately is the case for about 35% of Israelis. I'll add that, on the lighter side, that Israelis have produced many new apps, telephone apps, designed to make life in protected shelters a bit easier. And these range from games for kids while running in and out of shelters, to an app that calculates the amount of total time you have spent in shelter, to an app that calculates when is the best time of the day or night to risk taking a shower, based on the previous schedule of missile strikes and the interval in between them in your locale. Now, according to these apps, I've spent over 20 hours and 37 minutes this past week in my home shelter across some 60 incoming missile alerts. And the best or the safest time for me to take a daily shower is 3:01 p.m., 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
You might have seen polling in the United States that Americans aren't real sure about what we're doing in Iran. Although they're getting better. This week's polls are better than last week's polls. The Israeli people are behind the Israeli government in what it's doing.
According to the polls, well over 80% of Israelis are supportive of this war effort, including the extension of the war effort. Despite the difficulties, the extension of the war effort until a more decisive outcome, a more decisive crushing of Iran and its offensive abilities is achieved.
So while this war is going on, this is the big war, there's also the other war. There's the Gaza war. Some months ago, we were consumed with the Gaza war and Hamas and what Hamas was doing. Has there been a change in what Hamas is doing in Gaza based on the Iran war? Or do you see it as just waiting for the next phase?
So you're very correct that Gaza remains a significant confrontation front. It's still there. It hasn't gone away. And Israel will yet have to deal with Hamas more decisively once again. It's out of the news. There are scattered reports here and there about Hamas deepening its entrenchment, its control, Hamas carrying out executions of anybody who seeks to oppose its control. But remember, more than 50% of Gaza is under Israeli control today. The other less than 50% is essentially controlled by Hamas. That includes Gaza City, which is the one major piece of territory that the Israeli army did not operate in intensive fashion throughout the past 2 years. There are some who believe in the Trump plan. I'm not one of them. A pie in the sky plan to bring about a luxurious Riviera in Gaza with international investment and the emplacement of international peacekeeping forces that supposedly will disarm and demilitarize Gaza, disarm Hamas and demilitarize Gaza, and then bring good civic education and prosperity to peaceful Gazans. Like I said, not one of those who believes in that plan, and therefore the Gaza issue remains a problematic front, and we'll be back to it at some point, and that's true of Hezbollah and Lebanon as well, which Hezbollah last night launched 200 missiles into Israel, and I expect that even if the war with Iran dials down in the coming days or the coming weeks, the war with Hezbollah is just beginning.
So, yeah, I'm a little bit skeptical about the president's Gaza plan, and I'm not going to ask you to comment on our government or our president because I wouldn't do that. But I would suggest to you that there is one sort of operating principle that the president has, and that is he offers peace, security, and prosperity to anyone who will take it. But by taking it, you have to accede to his terms. Now, there are some people who take it. The Abraham Accords were his idea: peace, prosperity, security, but they had to move in a certain direction, and they did, and other people don't. And we, as the United States, I think, have a problem sometimes when people choose war over peace, prosperity, and security. But that leads to the next question. The Gulf states in this war have been interesting, partly because they're now understanding exactly what Iran means for them and what Iran means for the region. Bahrain introduced a resolution in the Security Council that condemns Iran's strikes in the Gulf of Hormuz. Israel wasn't mentioned. It passed 13-0. Russia abstained and China abstained, meaning that they were not willing in the Security Council to help their friend Iran. Are we seeing a broader understanding and maybe broader hope for the Abraham Accords for the future? Now, I know Bahrain's in, but Oman, wait, anybody else? Qatar, maybe, possibly? Or are you still a skeptic on Qatar?
I'm a deep opponent, not just a skeptic, of Qatar and the radical Sunni axis against Israel, which clearly includes Turkey and Qatar, if not some of the other countries you mentioned as well, remains a significant strategic threat to Israel, and we may see confrontation with that axis in the coming years. Erdogan in Turkey has put himself clearly on the side of Iran in this conflict. One of the things that Israelis worried about was Erdogan's influence and close relationship with Trump, and we're very pleased to see that Trump has dismissed the pressures that Erdogan had put on him to refrain from engaging in this military campaign. And Erdogan will, either by the U.S. or Israel, or the two of them combined, somebody's going to have to put Erdogan in a box. He yet threatens to control major parts of Syria. He's edging to take parts of northern Iran and to go after the Kurds. Erdogan's a major problem. Is there room for greater strategic partnerships in the region, as you suggest, and an expansion of the Abraham Accords agreements? The answer is yes. You would think so. You would think that Gulf states, in particular, who've seen how nefarious Iran is. After all, Iran has struck at 12 countries in the region, not just at Israel, and that includes all the Gulf countries. You would think that they would understand that their strategic future lies with Israel and therefore be more willing to openly engage with Israel. I don't know how quickly that's going to happen. Certainly behind the scenes, under the table, there's close coordination, closer than ever here. And a smart American president definitely has room for creative diplomacy to bring about new regional strategic architecture in the wake of this war.
Does quiet and behind the scenes include Saudi Arabia?
So I don't know the answer to that question. Everybody expected that prior to October 7th. It's said that we were on the cusp of a almost full-scale open relationship with Saudi Arabia at that time. Since then, Mohammed bin Salman, the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia, seems to have scaled back and away from Israel. I'm sure listeners to this call are well aware of the deluge of anti-Israel and even anti-Semitic material that has come out of Saudi Arabia in recent months, as it seems to have been peeling away. I think President Trump made a mistake in giving Saudi Arabia just about everything it wanted without conditioning that on movement towards Israel. They got a promise to be able to buy the F-35 fighter jets from the U.S. They have understandings about getting American acquiescence, if not cooperation, in nuclear enrichment, civilian nuclear enrichment on Saudi soil. They gave a lot of goodies to Trump, and Trump seemed to give them everything they wanted without, as I said, conditioning it on a Saudi opening to Israel. So it's going to take some time to rebuild that. It's more likely that we'll see movement with countries like Indonesia and some of the smaller Gulf states that you mentioned in the near term.
Okay. To return to your Turkey thought, it does seem to me that if you take out the monster Shiite, you could end up with a monster Sunni problem. Do you see that affecting Egypt? Egypt is very anti-Muslim Brotherhood at the moment. Al-Sisi is anti-Muslim Brotherhood. But do you see any possibility that Egypt could find itself overthrown, undermined, or in some other way brought down?
It's a good question. I haven't seen a lot of discussion about that, and I'd have to look into it a little bit more closely to be able to give you an informed answer. Egypt is ultimately a weak country, powerful military, rebuilding all the time, potentially a military threat to Israel in the future, but politically it's a weak country, and Egypt will go with the flow, meaning it will align itself with the reigning powers in the region. To the extent that it saw Israel as a declining power, as a battered power, in the wake of October 7th, it seemed to be sliding away from alignment with the U.S. and Israel. One would hope that in the wake of this powerful strategic statement that the U.S. and Israel have made in acting so decisively to crush Iran, Egypt will understand, where its butter or where its bread is buttered, and which side is on the strategic rise in the region, and move back into the American camp. Egypt would be making a major mistake by moving towards Erdogan or Qatar and the Iranians, and I haven't seen any evidence of that. You didn't want, Shoshana, to talk so much about President Trump, but I do. So I'll let you ask me another couple questions, but then I do. As an Israeli, there are some things I do want to say.
Go ahead. Guy, I mean, I won't ask you to talk about President Trump. It's not my job. But if you have something to say, then share it with our listeners.
So, Israeli media has spent all week fretting over the possibility that U.S. President Donald Trump will cut Operation Epic Fury short and abandon Israel to alone face a battered but abiding radical regime in Iran. And I think that's misplaced. Trump has proven to be this generation's greatest generator of moral purpose. His principled leadership and steadfast determination to win against the enemy, the Iranian enemy, should be celebrated, not derided by insinuations of disengagement. Trump has made all the right decisions with regard to Iran. I don't think that he is at all confused or capricious regarding Iran. He dumped Obama's rotten nuclear deal in 2018. He assassinated IRGC chief Qasem Soleimani in 2020. He worked with Israel on what he called Operation Midnight Hammer last June, and now Operation Epic Fury the past 2 weeks. He has proven neither fickle nor flighty. As I say, on the contrary, he has broadcast unwavering willpower and purpose. I think that in this strategic matter, he has shown profound understanding of his responsibility to reshape the regional and global strategic architecture by eviscerating Iran. And he's taken the historic opportunity to bring about peace through strength. And he's also shown domestic political courage, taking on the hard left progressive critics and his own hard right isolationist and Christian nationalist critics. He's taken risks with his own MAGA base by slopping down the loudest and most influential foul-mouthed fault finders like Tucker Carlson, and therefore he's taken on the Iranian challenge in defiance of conventional wisdom and the so-called responsible European approach, which for years has been to swallow Iran's piecemeal provocations to avoid war. He's defied the Ayatollahs instead of dancing with them, and therefore I think that he ought to be appreciated for his moral and strategic clarity. So, yes, if you want to worry that Trump could yet cut this short before the American military or the Israeli military thinks that Tehran has been dealt a sufficient enough blow. If you want to worry that he could yet cut a deal with Tehran that doesn't push Iran far enough away from a nuclear bomb, okay, go ahead and stew. But for the moment, his resistance to Iran is noble, and I think that needs to be recognized.
I would agree with everything you said. From an American point of view, I agree with all of those things. But I keep going back to a nagging thought that I shared with you earlier in the week. Freddie Clay, the late Freddie Clay, wrote a book called Every War Must End. He was writing about American wars. It's really important to say it's writing about American wars. He said wars end in one of three ways: victory, defeat, or petering out when the public gets tired of it and the army goes home. He meant the American army. We did it in Vietnam, but the war wasn't over. We did it in Afghanistan. The war wasn't over. We did it in Iraq, and the war wasn't over. So we tend to leave behind us, or at least we have in the latter part of the 20th and into the 21st century, leave the people behind to finish the war that we helped them with, but we say, okay, we've had it. The Russians actually did the same thing in Afghanistan as well. When their public made it impossible for the government to continue forward, the government stopped. Israel, on the other hand, that's why I keep saying Fred's writing about America. Israel is home. Israel has no home to go to. So Israel needs victory. Now, how you define victory or how your government defines victory is up to you guys or up to us, but there is no going home. So I think it leads to a longer term question. Is it possible that the end games diverge, that we see victory as reducing the Ayatollah's ability to build a nuclear weapon, and Israel sees victory as something else, and there could be a divergence, not because President Trump doesn't like Israel. I agree with you. He is strong, he is moral, he knows what he's after, and he knows what he's looking for. But could we do this? I think we could. What do you think?
So it is possible that the ceiling on this war will be set not by ideology or the cusp of Iran's remaining offensive capabilities, but by Washington's imperfect endurance. Wary of the economic costs of a prolonged conflict, limited by dwindling weapon stocks, and faced with diminishing military returns, at some point Trump may halt the campaign, even if, as I said earlier, the U.S. Armed Forces and the Israel Defense Forces believe that more battle is necessary. And we all know Trump's personality. He'll call the war very complete and an awesome win, a Trump triumph. In fact, he has already declared this to be the case, and go home. Nevertheless, I still think that President Trump understands that stopping the war now, amid some short-term economic discomfort, would be a victory for the Ayatollahs. Iran cannot be allowed to conclude that shutting down oil flows is its passport to survival now or in the future. And the spike in oil prices, as Trump himself has said, is a small price to pay for major security advances. And it makes no sense to leave so many loose ends in Iran, especially the large stockpile of highly enriched uranium for nuclear bomb making, which is why a raid of U.S. and Israeli ground troops on Isfahan and other sites is being considered to extricate and confiscate the uranium. And Trump did say help is on the way. That's what he told the Iranians, and he meant it.
Stop. Did you say that a ground mission is being contemplated for Isfahan and other places? I want to be real clear about that, because that's one of those things that the American public will have a lot to say about. Did you say that?
I did. And, you have to ask yourself, why over the last 12 days have the B-1, the B-2, and the B-52 bombers not gone in and bombed Fordo, Isfahan, and the other nuclear plants that were bombed last June? Why have we not seen the American heavy strategic bombers in action? And that's because something more needs to be done about the stockpiles. Over 400 kilograms supposedly of highly enriched uranium that the Iranians have racked up. And, we don't know so much of what goes on in this war, but yes, there's been a lot of discussion and planning for a ground raid to extricate and confiscate the uranium. In the end, maybe the U.S. will just bomb it all to hell once again. And I don't know what that does to the uranium. I don't know if that creates a nuclear blast. But you can't just leave this as a loose end. Now, Trump obfuscates. One day he says the war is almost over, and the next day, or maybe even the same day, he says there are battle plans for 6 weeks more. I think such ambiguity makes sense because it confuses the enemy. And if we're left guessing at Trump's next move, so are the Ayatollahs. But as I said earlier, I don't think that President Trump himself is confused or capricious at all.
Okay, David, we're going to wrap up. And that was both scary and enlightening and comforting in some ways about the Israeli public. Yes, we know they're stubborn, and that's one of the things we appreciate the most about our friends in Israel. Also, a great picture yesterday on the Washington Times newspaper of an Israeli small tribute monument to the American forces, which is a very pretty thing that the Israelis have put up. So it's good to have good friends. Now, I have to end with you saying something positive. So I have sat around and tried to think of a question, the answer to which would have to be positive. And I got one. What Israeli wine should we be buying now?
Okay, well, it's appropriate to ask the question because last week was the Jewish holiday of Purim, a holiday that where we drown our adversaries in drink and seek to catapult our consciousness to a refined world, to higher universes where the Jewish soul can commune with its creator and pretend for a moment that we're in a Garden of Eden like world before the sin where there was no evil. And Jews do strive to clear a path towards an elevated existence where there is no confusion between good and evil. As I said, nothing but the unadulterated good that existed, say, in the Garden of Eden prior to sin. This is all very theological and a little bit esoteric in Jewish tradition. I'll tell you what I drank on Purim. I drank some fantastic wines from the Galilee, such as the Luria Winery's Vineyards Edition. I drank a limited edition from Tura in Samaria, in the Samarian Highlands. I drank a high-end wine called Galilo from Dalton, also in the Galilee. And I drank a brand new wine just released by Flam Winery, which is a high-end boutique producer in the Judean Hills. From its first wine from its new vineyard in Evan Sapir in the mountains approaching Jerusalem. It's mostly a Syrah. Magnificent wine. I think I drank it too early. Needs a couple years in the bottle to mature, but they were all fantastic wines. There is a wine revolution here in Israel that is both exciting and from a Zionist perspective, as well as from a Jewish spiritual perspective.
Well, since some of us depleted our wine storage capabilities on Purim, this is a great way to end the program because now we have to refill. So, David Weinberg, I want to thank you for an enlightening, scary, wonderful, practical webinar. I hope you'll come back again. And to everybody else, we'll see you next time.